Welcome to a night of chilling tales on our channel. Tonight, we journey through 3 gripping horror stories that will haunt your dreams and linger in your thoughts. A graveyard shrouded in darkness and a forgotten love story buried beneath centuries-old tombstones prepare for an unforgettable experience. Brace yourself for whispers from the past, restless spirits, and secrets that should have remained buried. Stay tuned if you dare.
Lightning crackled across the sky, illuminating the dark silhouette of Memory Graveyard. The ancient tombstones cast long shadows, their inscriptions worn and barely legible. A cold wind howled through the overgrown weeds, carrying with it a sense of foreboding. Jake Thompson, the new night security guard, adjusted his rain-soaked jacket and trudged through the graveyard's main path. The graveyard had been largely forgotten, with only the occasional visitor paying their respects to the long-departed. Jake was used to the quiet, isolated environment. Tonight, however, the stormy weather seemed to amplify every sound, making the graveyard feel alive with whispers and rustling leaves. Jake shivered, partly from the cold and partly from an uneasy feeling that settled over him. The old mausoleum stood at the center of the graveyard, its stone facade darkened by years of neglect. The entrance was sealed with a heavy iron door, but tonight Jake noticed that it was slightly ajar. A chill ran down his spine as he approached the mausoleum, his flashlight casting a beam into the darkness beyond. Jake's footsteps echoed in the silence as he walked past the mausoleum. The air grew colder, and the whispers began, soft, mournful murmurs that seemed to come from all directions. He glanced around, seeing nothing but shadows moving among the tombstones. His flashlight flickered, and the whispers grew louder, forming fragmented sentences that seemed to call out to him. Justice, betrayed, forever bound. Shaking off the chill, Jake continued his patrol, his curiosity piqued. The whispers seemed to follow him, growing more insistent as he neared the mausoleum. He reached the entrance and pushed the iron door open, revealing a dimly lit interior. Ancient artifacts and dusty shelves filled the room, and a thick layer of dust covered everything. Jake's flashlight swept across the room, revealing a series of old, tattered journals and strange symbols etched into the walls. The symbols were unfamiliar, but they radiated an unsettling energy. On a dusty shelf, he found an old journal, its cover cracked and worn. Opening it, Jake discovered detailed accounts of horrific experiments conducted by the cult that once occupied the graveyard. The entries spoke of twisted rituals and suffering, and the names of the cult's victims were mentioned repeatedly. As Jake read, the whispers outside grew louder, turning into a cacophony of anguished voices. The temperature in the mausoleum dropped abruptly, and Jake's breath misted in the air. He glanced at his watch, noting that the storm outside had intensified, and the wind howled through the trees, adding to the eerie atmosphere. As the night progressed, Jake's nerves were frayed by the constant, disturbing whispers. He decided to leave the mausoleum and check the rest of the graveyard. As he walked among the tombstones, the shadows seemed to move with a life of their own. The spectral figures of the cult members began to appear, their forms barely distinguishable from the darkness. Their hollow eyes followed Jake's every move, and their mournful wails filled the air. Jake felt a growing sense of dread as he realized that the apparitions were becoming more distinct. They were no longer just shadows, they were full-bodied ghosts, their faces contorted in pain. The whispers now spoke directly to him, their voices pleading for help and justice. The cult members' apparitions were relentless, and Jake could feel their anger and sorrow pressing down on him. Determined to uncover the truth, Jake returned to the mausoleum and examined the journal more closely. He discovered a hidden compartment behind one of the shelves, containing a set of ancient keys and a cryptic letter. The letter detailed the final ritual of the cult, describing a forbidden ceremony intended to open a gateway between the realms of the living and the dead. Jake realized that the mausoleum was not just a burial place, but a focal point of the cult's dark rituals. The gateway described in the letter was a portal that allowed the spirits to cross over, and the cult's restless souls were trapped between worlds, seeking to escape their torment. As Jake pieced together the information, the apparitions grew more aggressive. They began to physically interact with their surroundings, their spectral hands reaching out toward him. The storm outside raged, lightning illuminating the graveyard in flashes, casting eerie shadows on the tombstones. Jake knew he had to act quickly to close the gateway and appease the spirits. He gathered the artifacts and keys from the mausoleum and performed the ritual described in the letter, using the symbols and ancient rites to attempt to seal the portal. The apparitions howled in protest, their forms swirling around Jake as he worked. The ritual reached its climax as Jake completed the final incantation, and the portal began to close. The spirits' anguished cries echoed in his ears as their forms grew fainter, their presence retreating. The temperature in the mausoleum returned to normal, and the whispers faded into silence. With the gateway sealed, the graveyard fell silent once more. The storm subsided, and the first light of dawn broke through the clouds. Jake, exhausted and shaken, surveyed the graveyard. The mausoleum's door was once again firmly closed, and the oppressive atmosphere had lifted. Jake knew that he had prevented a terrible fate for himself and others who might have encountered the restless spirits. As he left Memory Graveyard, he glanced back at the ancient tombstones and felt a sense of bittersweet relief. The spirits had been given their justice, but the memories of that night would remain with him forever. Though the graveyard was now at peace, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that the echoes of the cult's suffering lingered. On quiet nights, he sometimes thought he heard faint whispers carried on the wind, reminding him of the shadows he had faced. Memory Graveyard remained a place of solemn remembrance, its dark history a reminder of the past's lingering grip on the present. As Jake moved forward with his life, he carried with him the knowledge that some mysteries are best left undisturbed, and that the past has a way of reaching out, even from beyond the grave. Mark Anderson took a deep breath as he approached the wrought iron gates of Memory Cemetery. The old cemetery, long abandoned, had recently reopened, but its dark history had kept most people away. Mark had been hired as a security guard for the night shift, a job he had taken to start fresh after a recent breakup and a mountain of student debt. The mist rolled in thickly, swallowing the path ahead. The cemetery's sprawling grounds were barely visible, the headstones shrouded in darkness. The old gate creaked as Mark pushed it open, stepping into the chilling silence. His flashlight cut through the fog, revealing overgrown vegetation and neglected tombstones. He made his way to the small security office situated at the cemetery's entrance. The office, with its creaky wooden floors and dusty windows, seemed to fit the eerie ambiance of the place. Mark set up his equipment and began his first patrol, trying to shake off the unsettling feeling that clung to the air. As midnight approached, the cemetery took on a more sinister quality. The fog seemed to thicken, swirling around the tombstones like ghostly tendrils. Mark's flashlight flickered, casting long shadows that danced and twisted in the dim light. Suddenly, he heard faint cries for help echoing through the mist. They seemed to come from an unmarked grave near the edge of the cemetery. Mark, curious and slightly apprehensive, approached the grave. The whispers grew louder, more desperate. He knelt by the grave, trying to discern the source of the cries. To his shock, he noticed that the ground had been recently disturbed. The soil was loose and uneven, as if someone or something had been trying to escape. Mark's heart raced as he wondered what could have caused such a disturbance. As Mark continued his patrol, he stumbled upon an old mausoleum he had not noticed before. The door was ajar, creaking ominously in the wind. Intrigued, Mark hesitated only a moment before pushing the door open and stepping inside. The mausoleum was dark and musty, filled with cobwebs and ancient dust. The walls were covered in strange symbols and carvings, depicting scenes of ritualistic ceremonies and twisted figures. In the center of the room lay a collection of ancient artifacts, rusty chains, faded robes, and tattered scrolls. Mark's flashlight illuminated a journal lying on a stone pedestal. He picked it up, brushing off the dust. The pages were filled with frantic scrawls and unsettling drawings. The journal belonged to a man named Edgar Thorne, a notorious serial killer whose crimes had shocked the town years ago. Thorne had evaded capture and was believed to have hidden his victims' bodies in secret graves. As Mark read through the journal, he felt a growing sense of dread. Thorne's entries described a series of brutal experiments conducted on his victims, intended to prolong their suffering and ensure their torment even in death. The journal detailed how Thorne had created hidden burial grounds for his victims, concealing them beneath unmarked graves. The whispers in the cemetery grew louder, and the temperature dropped abruptly. Mark's flashlight flickered wildly, casting eerie shadows on the walls of the mausoleum. The spirits of Thorne's victims began to materialize, their ghostly forms drifting through the air with mournful expressions. The apparitions were tormented, their faces contorted in agony. They reached out to Mark, their ghostly hands passing through him. Their whispers were filled with anguish and anger, demanding justice for their unjust deaths. Mark stumbled back, his mind racing. He realized that Thorne's victims had not found peace and were now seeking retribution. The spirits seemed to follow him as he fled the mausoleum, their wails echoing through the cemetery. Desperate to escape the cemetery, Mark tried to call for help, but his radio was dead. The mist grew denser and the tombstones appeared to shift and change positions. Mark's flashlight dimmed to a mere flicker, casting ghostly, distorted images in the fog. He navigated through the mist-shrouded cemetery, trying to find a way out. The spirits grew more aggressive, their ghostly figures appearing in every corner of his vision. Mark was trapped in a nightmarish reality where the boundaries between past and present blurred. Mark's search led him back to the mausoleum. Determined to find a way to appease the spirits, he retraced his steps, hoping to uncover more about Thorne's hidden burial grounds. The spirits' wails grew more intense, and the mausoleum seemed to pulsate with a malevolent energy. In the heart of the mausoleum, Mark discovered a hidden passage beneath a trapdoor. He descended into the darkness, finding an underground chamber filled with more of Thorne's victims. The chamber was a grotesque display of suffering, with shackles and chains still stained with blood. In the chamber's center, Edgar Thorne's spirit materialized, more tangible and menacing than ever. Thorne's ghostly figure was a twisted mockery of his former self, his eyes burning with a malevolent fire. He demanded that Mark join the ranks of his tortured victims, threatening to drag him into the darkness forever. Mark fought back with everything he had. He used the artifacts from the mausoleum, performing a makeshift ritual to banish Thorne's spirit. The ritual was fraught with danger, and Mark's desperation drove him to act on instinct. As the first light of dawn began to pierce through the mist, the spirit's wails reached a crescendo. Mark completed the ritual, and Thorne's spirit was pulled into the depths of the chamber, disappearing into a swirling vortex of darkness. The cemetery fell silent as the mist began to clear. Mark, exhausted and shaken, stumbled out of the mausoleum. The graveyard, once a place of torment and despair, seemed to take on a calmer, more peaceful demeanor. Mark left Memory Cemetery behind, forever changed by his harrowing experience. He had faced the darkest aspects of human cruelty and the supernatural, emerging with a newfound respect for the unknown. The town, once plagued by the curse of Edgar Thorne, began to heal as the restless spirits found their peace. Mark's experience was a chilling reminder of the past's grip on the present, and he carried the memory of the forgotten graves with him, a testament to the enduring power of unresolved history. The rain fell in relentless sheets as Sarah McKinney arrived at Evermore Cemetery for her first night shift. The ancient cemetery, known for its overgrown graves and crumbling mausoleums, loomed large and foreboding under the stormy sky. The distant rumble of thunder and the occasional flash of lightning only added to the already eerie atmosphere. Sarah's flashlight cut through the darkness as she began her patrol, the beam dancing across weathered headstones and twisted branches. The cemetery had a reputation for being haunted, a fact that Sarah had dismissed as local folklore. Tonight, however, she felt a shiver of unease. As she walked, her flashlight flickered momentarily, casting eerie shadows that seemed to move with a life of their own. She paused, adjusting the beam, and continued her rounds. The cemetery's silence was occasionally broken by the rustling of leaves and the distant, mournful cry of the wind. At the stroke of midnight, Sarah heard something strange, a faint, sorrowful cry, barely audible over the storm. She followed the sound, her footsteps muffled by the thick carpet of fallen leaves. The cry seemed to be coming from an area of the cemetery that was neglected and overgrown, a place she hadn't previously explored. There, partially obscured by dense vegetation, was an unmarked grave. Fresh flowers lay atop the weathered soil, a stark contrast to the surrounding decay. Curiosity piqued, Sarah knelt beside the grave and noticed something unusual, an old, rusted metal plaque half buried in the dirt. Brushing away the grime, she revealed an inscription that read, "In loving memory of Elizabeth and James, forever entwined in the shadows of time." The names were familiar, though she couldn't recall from where. She glanced around, feeling a creeping sense of being watched. The discovery of the unmarked grave only deepened Sarah's curiosity. She decided to investigate further, following a faint path leading to a forgotten mausoleum. The heavy iron door was ajar, and a cold breeze wafted from within, carrying an unsettling chill. Sarah pushed the door open, revealing a dimly lit interior filled with the scent of damp earth and decay. The mausoleum was lined with dusty shelves, each cluttered with old, forgotten artifacts. Her flashlight illuminated ancient symbols etched into the walls, symbols that seemed to pulse with a faint, eerie light. On a pedestal in the center of the room lay a leather-bound journal, its cover worn but intact. Sarah picked it up and opened it, revealing pages filled with delicate handwritten notes. The entries detailed a tragic love story involving Elizabeth and James, two lovers who had perished under mysterious circumstances. As Sarah read the journal, she felt a cold presence enveloping her. The temperature in the mausoleum plummeted, and shadows began to flicker and dance around her. Whispers filled the air, echoing the names of Elizabeth and James. The spectral figures of the lovers materialized, their forms translucent and shimmering with a ghostly light. Elizabeth, with a face full of sorrow, reached out to Sarah. "Help us," she whispered, her voice trembling. "We were betrayed. The truth must be revealed." James, his eyes filled with anguish, nodded in agreement. "Victor Harlow. He was the cause of our suffering. Uncover his deeds and set us free." Determined to help the restless spirits, Sarah delved into the history of Victor Harlow, the wealthy landowner mentioned in the journal. She discovered records of his dark rituals and manipulative practices. Victor had used his influence to control those around him, and his cruelty had led to the tragic deaths of Elizabeth and James. Sarah's investigation led her to hidden records and accounts of Victor's activities, revealing a web of deceit and betrayal. The lovers had been the victims of a cruel ritual designed to extend Victor's life and power. A ritual that had gone terribly wrong. As Sarah pieced together the dark history, the apparitions of Elizabeth and James grew more restless. The cemetery became a battleground of supernatural forces, with shadows creeping closer and whispers growing louder. Victor's malevolent spirit, desperate to maintain control, began to manifest more aggressively. One night, as Sarah patrolled the cemetery, she encountered Victor's spectral form. The air crackled with malevolent energy as Victor's ghostly figure confronted her, his eyes burning with a fierce, vengeful light. "You cannot change the past," Victor's voice boomed, echoing through the night. "They were mine to control, and so are you." Sarah stood her ground, her resolve unwavering. "I will reveal the truth, and I will free them from your grasp." The confrontation with Victor's spirit was intense and terrifying. The cemetery seemed to come alive with supernatural activity as Sarah fought to protect the spirits of Elizabeth and James. She used the knowledge she had gained from the journal to perform a ritual designed to break Victor's hold over the spirits. With each incantation, the air grew lighter and the shadows began to retreat. The apparitions of Elizabeth and James, now bathed in a serene light, expressed their gratitude. The spirits, finally free from their torment, began to fade into the ether, their presence replaced by a profound sense of peace. The following days brought a calm to Evermore Cemetery. The oppressive atmosphere had lifted, and the once overgrown graves and neglected mausoleums now seemed to hold a quiet, respectful dignity. Sarah felt a profound sense of accomplishment, knowing she had helped bring closure to the tragic love story and freed the tormented souls. As she continued her nightly patrols, the cemetery was no longer a place of fear, but of quiet reflection. The fresh flowers at Elizabeth and James's grave had become a symbol of their eternal love, now resting in peace.
Thanks for joining us on this spine-tingling adventure through the shadows. We hope these tales left you with a chill and a thrill that will linger long after the lights go out. If you enjoyed these eerie stories, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss a moment of the macabre. Share your thoughts and fears in the comments below. What haunted you the most? Until next time, keep your lights on and your mind open, because you never know what might be lurking in the dark. Stay eerie, stay